Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for what we think will be a very lively and interesting discussion about moms of color in the academy and the trials and tribulations of making it through that. This conversation today, let me just give you a quick overview. The conversation today is oriented at, as I said, moms of color in the academy. And we wanted to, we thought it would be really interesting to, because we have had so many of our scholars that have gone through this process, and more than 2/3 are female, come through this process with children. My best story of one of our scholars that has made it through was a young lady that had 3 children while she was earning her PhD, and had each child in between semesters and never literally missed a day of classes getting her graduate degree. So, which was absolutely amazing. But we thought that the challenges that go with that would make for an interesting discussion and maybe some sharing of information. We have with us today 3 of our program graduates who've all had these experiences. We have Dr. Carrie Diaz Eaton. She is a mathematical biologist whose research in complex adaptive systems spans evolution, ecology, and STEM education. Dr. Diaz earned her BA and MA in mathematics at the University of Maine and her PhD from the University of Tennessee. We also have with us Dr. Charity Gordon. She is a clinical assistant professor in Department of Middle and Secondary Education at Georgia State University here in Atlanta. Dr. Gordon's research and scholarship focuses on dialogue teaching, critical pedagogy, literacy education, and urban education. We also have with us this afternoon Dr. Loretta McGregor. She is a professor of psychology and immediate past president of the Faculty Senate at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, Arkansas. She's been a member of the Arkansas State faculty for 15 years, served as chair of the department, dean. She has done it all. Thank you all very much for agreeing to be with us today and to add your wisdom to this discussion. So what I want to do is, we would like this to be a very conversational engagement, and I'm going to get us started by asking a couple of questions to facilitate the conversation, and I will ask periodic questions. I'm not going to direct the questions at any one of you, but would like you all to just join in or take the question on as they come up. So first question, to get us going. How many children did you have, and how old were they when you were going through your graduate program? So I'll let each of you kind of give us that perspective. Carrie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I have 2 children. They are now 13. That's my oldest, Gabrielle, and 10. I feel like she's always like 10 going on 20, 5 going on 16. That's how it feels. And that's Yudani. So I had both of them when I was in graduate school. I had, the way that my program worked, we had a couple of benchmarks. One was what we called prelim exams, which are based on subject area, and those are like long exams. I got pregnant with my first right after I passed my prelims. And then my second, I had her when I was more in the all but dissertation stage. And so actually the first one, he came a little bit earlier than expected. And I was supposed to defend my proposal for my dissertation, and that had to be canceled because I had to go to the hospital. And so I ended up having to do that like in a little bit of a haze 6 weeks into giving birth, but that's another story.
Well, thank you. Charity, how about you? Where are you, and where are yours when you were going through graduate school?
So I finished my program in 2017, and I started in 2013, and I found out I was expecting the following year, and then I found out that I was going to be having twins. So
Like,
a year into my program. So I actually sought out an advisor who was also a mom of young children, and we were pregnant at the same time. So and we were due on the same day. So that's a funny story. But my kids are now 5, going on 6. They'll be 6 in December, and I have fraternal twins, a boy and a girl.
excellent, excellent. I had forgotten about that, and yes, that does bring back memories of
Mhm.
what you had to go through. Yeah. Dr.
Yeah.
McGregor.
So when I started graduate school, I already had children. I had a 3-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. And for a year and a half, I also had one of my younger sisters who at the time was 16, 15, lived with me for about a year and a half. So my children, like I said, went with me when I started my grad program. So I was married, had the house and kids and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And now my children are they are adults. My son is 26. My daughter is 36, and my son has a 4-year-old grandson who is my best friend.
Thank you all. All right, so I think you all come from some very different. I mean, you all bring some very different experiences to the equation in terms of where you were in the childbearing ages, kids on board, kids being born as you're going through this process. Given that, how what were some of the things you had to do in your programs to advocate for yourselves in terms of making it work for you? Because it's not easy. And I will just share with you, because when I first started this program, and so you're talking about late 80s, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, women having kids in graduate school was still very frowned upon. It was discouraged by everyone in terms of impacting your a career path from a woman trying to pursue a PhD. And I mean, I have seen changes with that. So what did you all do to or did you have to do anything in your programs to help advocate for yourselves, given that you were trying to manage graduate school and rear rear young children? Charity, would you be the first to address that, please?
Sure. So one of the things, like I said, was I sought out an advisor who was also a mom, um, and mentors who were also moms in academia, and that was really huge for me. Like we talked weekly, and so that was a big source of support for me throughout my program. And also when I delivered my twins, I was out of commission. I was still taking online classes, and she did a directed study with me. But I was out of commission for about 3 months. And so I needed a different kind of support. And she was able to understand my needs, right? Because she's also a mom, pregnant at the same time. We're going through some of the same things. But when I delivered my twins, I um, started like full body, I know TMI, but start full body hemorrhaging. um, and they couldn't get the blood to stop. And so they had to induce a coma. And I was in a coma for 3 days. Um, and so during that time, I underwent several blood transfusions, surgery after surgery. And I wasn't walking for about 3 months after they finally did save my life. Um, and so my advisor, having gone through that experience with me and understood the special conditions that I had, just moved my studies online. And so that was really huge for me, just her being able to understand my needs and not just just saying, well, you just need to drop out and, you know, not finish, take care of yourself, which I did, but I was able to do it from the comfort of my own home. So that was one thing. And I was very intentional about advocating for myself in that way and letting them know exactly what I needed, knowing exactly what's going on. So.
Oh, there's a lot to be said for somebody going through it about the same time you are. So they have some sense of what you're experiencing. And, you know, kudos to them to alter your program to allow you to do that and to present it to you in a way so that you could still continue on and get both goals accomplished. That's excellent. Loretta, Carrie, any input in terms of what you all might have had to do in your programs to get the resources that you needed?
Carrie, do you want to go
do
first?
anything special? Carrie?
Yeah, I think I did a really bad job of this, actually. I think I tried to be like, nothing, you know, I can move on and I can be exactly the same as everyone else. And I think in retrospect, I wish I'd advocated for more. And I think part of that was the lack of other people going through exactly the same thing and just not knowing what I would need or anticipating. So, for example, I remember my advisor was really supportive. He was like, "Oh, you can like bring the playpen in and you can have your baby with you in the office," which was great. But it turns out it does not match the way that I work at all. Like I cannot, for me, it's just, I cannot work the same time my kid is next to me. It's I feel like I want to focus on one or the other and not try to do both. And so it took me a while to figure out and then figure out what I was supposed to advocate for, given that I know that about myself later in the process. So I think those things were a little bit easier maybe with the second kid, and I kind of already knew. I found myself more advocating for like in other places, like conferences, for example. You know, I think I remember SREB going to the Institute and being like, can I have a room that like with my kid and can I bring my husband and like, how would you help with the expenses for that? And, you know, I think it was just in Atlanta, so it was driving, so it wasn't a big deal or something, but I distinctly remember like asking for those kinds of things. I really appreciated it when some places were proactively thinking about it and advertising. And there was one conference, like the only conference I had like attended sort of after I had my first child, the first conference I really went to and got on a plane kind of thing was a conference. It was an evolution conference, and it was because they offered on-site childcare. And so I was able to take my son, he was under 2, so it was free. I got, you know, some travel help from being a graduate student and registration help. And he could stay with me for no extra cost, and he could attend daycare for no extra cost. And so like, it was all of those things that I didn't have to advocate for, but like, I almost didn't go to other things because they didn't have those built in. And so later on in my career, I knew, oh, if they're not advertising these on their website, just ask them. They might be able to do something for you.
Thank you.
So I think I'm probably similar to Carrie in that given the time when I was actually in my program, there were not a lot of other parents in the program, other mothers in the program in particular. There was one other student who she was a mother, and we were not exactly in the same program. We were in the same department. And it was a little bit different because we didn't get a chance to see each other very much. I was very fortunate in that I had a strong support system outside of the institution. So my spouse at the time, he really did a good job of supporting me during my program. And I also established other support systems through outside activities like my church and different places like that, where there were individuals who would help me if I needed assistance with my children going somewhere, my daughter being a teenager, if I needed her to go somewhere, I had established those friendships with other parents and through church, like I said, where they would agree to take her and pick her up because they knew that I was in school. So those types of things were important for me. And again, similar to Carrie, when it came to professional development, I made sure to include my family in my professional development opportunities. We just turned it into a vacation for them. So I would conference and they would vacation. And I remember particularly, I think my son at the time was maybe 2 and my daughter 12, and we went to the American Psychological Association conference in New York. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to go and participate in the conference was because they did advertise heavily about childcare. And they had on-site and off-site childcare. So you could have your child sort of at a youth club almost or a kids club while you did conferencing. And then they also had babysitters that they had vetted, that if you wanted to hire a babysitter, they had a list of babysitters available for you that you could hire so that you and your mate could go out and do things. So, looking for those types of opportunities. And then also just being honest with your advisor. I had 2 advisors. So one of my advisors was new and he kind of wasn't quite sure what he was doing. And he was being mentored by the department chair. And so I also benefited from having the department chair as sort of my secondary advisor. And I worked with him quite a bit. And so he was a little more mature and understood what was going on. And I would just go to him and I go, look, Charlie, here's what's going on. I need this, or I need that, or I need some time to do this. And he was very good. But there were no female role model mentors for me available because all of the female mentors that I knew in the discipline at the time, they were childless and they had chosen to be childless.
That was the norm at one time,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, that was the norm. I think you all have touched on this next question I have for you, but can you identify a resource or tool that was particularly helpful to you in terms of going through that process of having children in graduate school?
SREB. I mean, without a doubt, for me, it
Good,
was it
good
was
answer.
well, no, seriously, because without the financial support of SREB, I could not have done it. I mean, there is just no way I could not have done it. And I still cobbled together, other little part-time jobs of being an adjunct here. I remember particularly during this time of the season, and Dr. A, I close your ears because we weren't supposed to do this, but uh, I worked a retail job from November to January.
I am shocked you are
I
letting that
know.
out.
True confession. I work retail from from November to January, just so that I could have some extra money coming in. And I actually chose the retail location that I was working in particular because I then got discounts on all the clothes that I needed to buy for my kids for Christmas. I got a 20 to 25% discount. So and then I left in January because I was working on commission and I didn't want them to take any of my commissions back from the sales. So, yeah.
All right. Carrie, Charity, any particular resources that you all found to be especially helpful in this process? Carrie?
I'll plus one Loretta's support SREB because I think that was absolutely gave me the opportunity to, when I realized I can't do this with my kid next to me, to pay for childcare. That was huge. There was a gap in terms of, I had my childcare close like a couple of weeks before I gave birth. And so I had to scramble to find something new. And the only thing they had was like 2 days a week. And of course, it wasn't the same days I was teaching, right? Like, and
Of course.
so I had really great peers. My office mate watched my child once a week so that I could go in and teach. And so I would give her him, and she had no idea what to do, but I was just like, here, like, he will sleep most of the time. If he doesn't, play some music, like, do your best. And I just sort of made it through. But also, I guess two other things, and I think this is less about school structure, et cetera, and academic, but going back to something Loretta also mentioned about sort of community support, which was, we happen to have a local a local moms board crop up just coincidentally the same time, and it was for the city of Knoxville. I can't remember what it was called now, but I made some great connections there with local mothers, one of which was not in grad school herself, but her husband was in grad school, and we had kids about the same age. And another one which was an instructor at a community college. And so again, it was still sort of an academic thread, but it wasn't somebody I would have met. Neither of these people were people I would have met in my department. And so that was so helpful. And then the other was that I signed up, I don't know, probably through that resource, but somehow I found out that there was like a community health resource where they would send somebody to your house if you were a first-time mom, and like show you some games to play with your kids and stuff like that. And they would hold some play groups and things. And so it was a great program. And even so much so that when I had my second child, I was living in a different location. And so then like I went looking back, like, does this town have anything like that thing? Because that was so great. And so I guess like think about your local community in town. There's actually might be surprising resources there.
Thank you. Charity, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree that SREB was a huge support in being able to just focus on school and not have to worry about working full time, which I was doing before when I found out I was expecting twins. And also my spouse, of course, his income helped as well. And then so with my childcare support that I got was kind of like just a conglomerate of a lot of different things over time, because nobody really likes watching twins. So everybody before I got pregnant, or when I got pregnant, everybody was like, we'll be there and we'll divide all my friends. I had lots of friends before. They all disappeared when the babies actually got here. And so I really had to like just be creative, and so the first thing that I did, our university has an early childhood program that offers grants and scholarships for parents who are professors there or students there. And so I didn't qualify for that. But that's an option. Some colleges do that, but you have to qualify financially for that. And then I used this Mom's Day Out program that was sponsored by a church that's near my home. And so they did 2 days a week. And so I would drop them off 2 days a week so I can get some stuff done. And it was only in the mornings. It was like 9 to 12, they would take them. And then I found a little girl at my church. She wasn't a little girl. She had just graduated from high school, was going to Kennesaw State, which is close to where I live. And so I invited her. I said, hey, you can come sit there, have an extra room, come stay with me for a few days out of the week. I'll pay you in a lump sum. And she was like, cool, and so she got me through a lot of the time, that like the early years. And then and my mother as well, she would come whenever she could. But then when I turned 18 months, I was in the middle of my comprehensive exams and I didn't have childcare. Like my mom, she lives 3 hours away, and the babysitter backed out at the last minute, and I was panicking like, oh my goodness, how am I going to finish? And so my mom came and helped me for a few days. And then I just really just had to like, this is unreliable, like just pulling from everywhere. So I just had to put them in daycare, but I made sure it was like, I wanted to savor every moment with them. I'm like that kind of mom. And so I hated to put them in daycare, but I did it, and it saved the rest of my I was able to get stuff done finally. It was actually the best decision I think I made towards the end when things got a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
And I think Charity made a really good point. I did in-home daycare for my son. With my daughter, I had family, and so I had my mom and my grandmother, and she did not go to daycare at all. She stayed home with family, and then she went to school. My son, a little bit different. He I didn't want him to go to daycare immediately, but I was working full time. And so we did in-home care where I hired 2 students. So I just put some flyers up on campus and interviewed. And I actually hired 2 students. One would come in the afternoons on certain days and in the mornings on the other, and then they would switch on other days. And so I had, for his first 2 years, probably about a year and a half, I hired local students to do in-home care, and they would come to my house and they would stay there with him so that he was in his own environment. So that's another resource that you could consider using.
Yeah. Very good point. Very good point. Well, thank you all. And and I'm amazed at the creativity of all of you for figuring and trying to navigate this, because I mean, there's no, if you will, there's no playbook for how you do it, and fitting that into your individual circumstances, because each of you, you know, we all have our own individual circumstances that we have to cope with or deal with. And you know, nobody's got that all laid out for us. Well, what about well, and I think you all touched on this, that whole issue of child care, daycare. You know, Charity, you had a very different, a little bit different view. Like, you know, I don't want to go that route, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm trying to keep it at bay as long as I can. But you ended up doing that to you, Loretta, where you're going, nope, I had enough of a support system already there, where and I got a mom that was in my house, so that, you know, my kids could be home all day. Carrie, what about you in that circumstance? Where, and I think you touched on it a little bit ago, but remind our listeners.
Oh yeah, well, certainly. I think there was a, and I can't, I'm not sure if this is true or perceived. I felt like there was a lot of pressure to be kind of a stay-at-home mom who just did everything. And I even had like another colleague of mine in the sister department to my program. She had a kid a little bit before me, but she was like, I would get up at 4 a.m. and I would write for 3 hours, and then I would watch the kid all day. And I was like, oh my God, like I just like could not imagine trying to do it that way. And so I think it was a little awkward. It was kind of bucking the trend at the time to sort of think about daycare. There were a lot of mom stay out programs and things like that. So that was good. But actually, I think the daycare sort of opening up only for like me only finding something that worked for a couple of days a week, even though that was sort of a crisis. On the other hand, I think it actually worked really well and helped me transition in those roles. And
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry quite as much about things like pumping or finding a space as many hours, and you know, things like that were more necessary later when I had, you know, full-time care. My daughter, where we were living, we ended up getting somebody who just watched kids in their house and was really affordable. So I could kind of, that infant care stage in some areas where you live can be really, really expensive, which is another sort of barrier, I think, a lot of times to thinking about like full daycare options. And so finding somebody who ran an in-home was a much more affordable option. And we found out about that just word of mouth through church kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely, now my kids are home all the time. I feel like I'm back to starting zero.
Yeah, back to square one.
Now I'm back to square one. And I'm lucky that, eventually after we went through sort of the initial, like, I know this is sort of off topic, but it's sort of
All right.
relevant, coming right back to like where we started, right?
Yeah.
In this COVID pandemic. Initially I was kind of like doing it on my own, but then in planning for this semester, I was like, I'm going to invest in me and the kinds of things I need to do to just make sure I get tenure. Let me like make the time and budget space to hire somebody that will like merge households with us and can take care of my kids on the days that they're not at school. And that has made a huge difference to my sanity this semester. And, so I think everyone kind of figuring out, how do you work best? What do you need to do? How are your priorities? And those priorities are going to shift over time, depending on where you are and what your current goals and challenges are.
Yeah, excellent point. And so, I think all of you have kind of tapped into this notion of knowing yourselves well enough to know how you work and what you can do, or what's comfortable and acceptable to you, to know kind of how you're going to manage a child or children in plural. So part of that process is understanding enough about yourself. And then one thing about kids, they help you to, if you don't know it, you're certainly going to learn it pretty quickly. If you don't know yourself, you're gonna figure it out pretty quickly, or you're not going to manage that process very well. This whole issue of work-life balance. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm late into a career, and we still all struggle. Let me speak for myself. I can't speak for anybody else. I still struggle with that, trying to balance out, what you're giving for yourself and what you're trying to do for your work. What do you think was the most important thing as you were coming through this process? And I would even include that for you all today. I mean, you're managing lives where, if you're like me, I mean, you're professionals, you have jobs. We're still trying to figure out and balance out your work life versus your home life. What do you all? How are you doing that? How are you managing that even today?
Well, I'm going to go back to when I was in graduate school. I probably didn't do it as well as I should have. Um, Immediately after I graduated from my degree program, my marriage ended, and I think part of it was that I did not pay close enough attention to my spouse's need during the program. And so I think if I were to suggest something to people who have a significant other, is to make sure that you include them, and that you uh, make sure that you carve out time for them as well. I was totally dedicated to my children, made sure that their needs were met. I tried to make sure that my needs were met. I went to the gym, I worked out. I thought I was meeting his needs, but maybe not as much as I probably could have. And so, making sure that you are checking in with your spouse, as well as checking in with yourself, to make sure that you're still connected, and to make sure that you know what you do need. I figured out early on in my program that I had to have some time where I could do physical educate or physical exercise, and not have to be concerned about schedules for anyone. And so I teamed up with another student in my program, and she and I started working out at least twice a week at our local gym on campus, just so that we could have some stress relief. And in addition to that, it gave me just that little hour of time that I sort of needed to myself, because there were demands from so many other places. Demands from my kids, demand from my spouse, demand from the program, demand from two advisors. And I just needed some time where I did not have to think about being in charge and doing anything. And so that little 1 hour time that I had a couple of times a week was invaluable to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Carrie, anything more you'd like to add to that conversation of that balancing out your work and or graduate school experience and family? And yeah, I mean, it's a lot to juggle, and I don't think anybody would ever describe it as being very easy. But how did you manage it?
So I'm very detail oriented, and I love schedules. And that's probably why I couldn't keep a babysitter, because I had like every minute of their day is like planned. But it helped me to maintain like balance, because I would schedule time for me, schedule time for my kids. And that's something that my advisor, she helped me with that, because I would feel guilty for just enthralling or just engaging in so much work and not really having a whole lot of time and missing moments and things like that. And one thing she told me is that, they're not going to remember any of this. So don't worry about that, and the time that you do have, make it very intentional. And so even if it's just 30 minutes, we're playing a game, we're singing, we're dancing, for 30 minutes, and then I'm off to work. And so that was built into my schedule. That was built into my day, where we were being intentional. So they may not remember that I was working for 8 hours that day or studying for 8 hours that day, but they're going to remember that 30-minute block of time that I was intentional about spending with them and my spouse as well. And so the schedules really helped me. And also I had another mentor who, her advice, I never took it because I was kind of, afraid to do this, but she would call in sick to work or play hooky. And she would tell her family, okay, I'm off to work, get dressed like she's going to work, and then go to the movies and go, to lunch. I was like, I always wanted to try it. And she was so happy, she's like, I need those days. Right. And so I understand it now, especially like being cooped in the house with my family for, 24/7.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things that, those were the tips of advice that were given to me that I thought, just how other people created balance, that I took, some that helped me.
Good. Thank you.
Charity, similar to, I was going to just say, similar to you, I am too much of a rule follower to have done that, but kudos to her for coming up with that. But yeah, I would have then felt guilty all day because I played hooky.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm the hooky player, but I wouldn't, more like a half a day. And this is how I get my Christmas shopping done. So I'm just saying, might be particularly relevant. No, I think like, what everybody said was pretty right on in terms of thinking about your priorities. For me, having like work-life balance has very much meant work-life separation. And that just works really well for me. So I'm super efficient, the carved time that I have for work. And then when I'm home, I'm home. I think those lines have gotten more blurry, particularly in the pandemic. I think one thing that I've felt as my career has progressed is that I've done a lot more traveling. And I think, initially it was fun if you can make it into a family vacation, but like then it's like too much. Or when my spouse at one time had a non-academic job, it was hard for him to get the time off of work to be with to do travel and things like that. So that became more logistically difficult. And I think I remember there was some funny sort of meme that went around, like, what thing did you say cursed the pandemic to be? And I was like, oh, I said I really should do less traveling and spend a little bit more time with my family. Like that was my New Year resolution. So guess what? I spent a lot less time traveling, like 0 time traveling this year, and 100% with my family. So I think it's good to not just So go into it and sort of figure out a thing, but like know that those priorities and everything else are going to change over time, and then consistently go back and reflect on like, how are your priorities? Like, how are you doing? And like, I know a big thing that I've done is like, I think it has been a little blurry after 5 o'clock because I'm still at home and it doesn't feel like I'm in a different space. And so I'll pull out the computer and I'll start answering emails, and then like, and then my son will be like, okay, like mom, like, you want to do, oh, well, after this email, right? And so then I had to like stop and be like, nope, I'm going to go play ping pong for a half an hour with you. Like I had to like stop and like, no, that's not like what is he really saying to me? He's really saying like, I miss you, mom. And like, is right now is wind down time. And I want to spend that time with you. And so like, just like, the cues are different. He's not crying anymore. Right? It's more of like, hey mom, but like, yeah, I think just keeping up on that and evolving your strategy to meet those new demands.
Good suggestion. I like that. And they, remembering back to when my kids were very young, it is knowing that as they age, they just give you different kind of clues, and you got to be paying attention to them. I mean, I think all of you have hit on that. Is just paying attention to your kids. And Carrie, you just touched on this. So, I mean, we all are dealing with a parenting in a COVID environment. How would you reflect on how parenting has changed in a COVID environment? How's it changed your approaches? As I think several of you alluded to already, I mean, you're home all day, every day with your children, be they older children or young children. I mean, it has changed all of how we are approaching our days, how we are working, how we're playing, how we're parenting. Any thoughts or reflections on what this parenting has been like for you all? Charities, I guess, especially for you with younger kids in this COVID environment. Any thoughts about how you're managing this?
I'll go last, because I already sort of said how I'm managing it now, which is that I hired somebody to help me manage it. But I'll let other folks answer, and you can come back.
Carrie, that works too. That works. Charity, how are you doing?
So actually, it hasn't been that bad. Unfortunately, my husband lost his job. He was furloughed, and so he's been playing mommy while I get work done. And so I usually work most of the day from home, and then he's doing virtual kindergarten with them on the computer, and then we switch. And so it hasn't, and also like keeping a daily schedule and routine. We get out of the house. Sometimes I get out of the house by myself, and so I think that's important. And so it hasn't been so terrible. I think just maintaining that balance. And also it's kind of caused me to have a lot of perspective and being intentional about what actually matters, and what doesn't matter. Because I mean, I was overwhelmed this semester because the professors at my university all had to take on extra loads because they did budget cuts. And so I'm advising, I'm coordinating a program, I'm teaching a full load of classes.
Oh.
I'm writing, it's like a lot. It's just a lot. And so I just had to, before I have an anxiety attack about all this stuff that I have to get done and spend time with my kids and my spouse and spend, I just have to take a step back and just maintain my perspective, what actually matters right now. And sometimes that means I'm not doing anything today. I'm going to put grading until next week or tomorrow. And just today is just about self-care and mental health. And so that's been important for me to just kind of take those and act. And it doesn't make a difference whether I put it off a day, nobody dies, everybody's fine. I get it done eventually. And so just it just takes a second to just click. Before I have this anxiety attack, I just click and say what actually matters right now. Just it's like a thing in my brain that I just kind of like turn on.
Well, you ask yourself that question, like, hey, what matters? What
Yeah,
really
what
matters?
matters.
And stop and
Right.
remember
Right.
that. That's good.
Mhm.
That's very good. Yeah, very good. Anybody else? And I guess, well, Carrie, you've already done it. Loretta, yours are pretty grown at this point. So that we have give our listeners and viewers a chance to ask some questions. One last question. As you all reflect back about the whole process, is there one piece of advice you all would offer out to those who tuned in today? Is there what is the one piece of advice you would have for those who are tuning in, given this whole experience of raising kids, coming through this process? What's the one piece of advice you would offer?
I think what you just mentioned, going back and reflecting and adjusting priorities is great. I'm going to add something else, which I think also references what Charity just said. I think many of us, depending on when we had had our kids and the environments in which we had them, it felt like we have to choose. Like we have to choose between our family and our career. And I don't think any of us were given the opportunity to explore or realize how having kids has enhanced who we are also as academics and professionals and enriched our lives generally. And so, even having Charity sort of talk about, how she's coped with the pandemic makes me realize, also think about the ways that this change has improved, or me spending more time with my kids has even improved, for example, my teaching, because I got to see how all of my kids were adjusting during, my actual biological children were adjusting in the pandemic to new teacher directions and moving online and confusion and things sent by email and things sent in the LMS system. And then I was like, I am not going to create a class like that. I'm going to have really clear channels of communication, and I am not going to try to use too many digital tools. And like, it just made me, I think, it's just a more compassionate educator too. I think I was like, well, if this was my kid emailing me, like, it's been hard right now, and I'm going to cut a little bit of slack, and just little things like that too. And I think I've become a better educator because of the things that my children have taught me over the years. And that even goes to, my son has a number of conditions, including but not limited to dyslexia and ADHD and anxiety. And so, now the way that I handle students when they come and talk to me that, I have ADHD and, I just want, or they may not even name it, but just the way that I handle accommodations is just giving me a different perspective. And so I would say fight the narrative that it's one or the other. I think I also self-filtered out a lot of opportunity because I was like, oh, but I want to have a family. Well, like that, I thought that meant that I only really could be in a non-tenured position to do that well. And so I've realized, it doesn't have to be either or. Like,
Right.
you can do both as long as you're attentive to what you want.
Good, thank you. Charity, your thoughts on what would be your one piece of advice to folk in terms of what that would you give current mothers going into who are in graduate school?
I guess I would say to not be so hard on yourself. I was very hard on myself throughout my time as a mom and a student because I couldn't get everything done. And so that was, again, just perspective, being intentional with your time and doing the best that you can. That's all you can do. So.
Good. I appreciate that. Loretta.
Yeah,
The last word on this.
I'm just gonna say, ditto pretty much to what Charity just said. I was actually thinking the same thing. Be kind to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. And as she mentioned earlier, and I know now from experience that um, your children aren't going to remember a lot of the things that you fret over. So my children are adults now. And I remember some of the things that I fretted over about, not being able to go to my son's daycare for something and his dad going, and he has no memory of this. He remembers me baking a birthday cake and taking it and having a party with his friends at daycare. My daughter remembers me going to her basketball games, coming straight from school and going to her basketball game. Although, since she was a teenager, today she still reminds me of that one basketball game that I
That
missed.
you missed.
It's like, Mom, you missed that one game. But other than that, both of my children now have they've talked to me about that experience, and they both say things like, we had great childhood. We had a great childhood. So they don't remember a lot of the stuff that was swirling around in grad school and the crazy schedules and those kinds of things. I remember them. And now that I look back on them, I do ask myself, why was I so hard on myself? I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be the best mom that they need at that time. So
Thank you. Very, very wise. And I appreciate all of your insights into this. This is excellent. I want to give some of our those who've tuned into this discussion a chance to ask any questions. I see that there are some questions that have been posed. Veronica, do you want to share a couple of those? Or it's a small enough group. If any of you want to just ask a question, please feel free to chime in. Just unmute and pose a question to the panel.
Okay, I can start with a couple of the questions that are in the chat, and then if anybody else has an additional question, let them go ahead and ask.
Okay.
Somebody asked about whether we could have somebody speak to navigating a relocation and building a base in a new place.
So I responded to the question in the chat, and one of the things I did that. So I relocated to go to my graduate program. I relocated after my graduate program, and then starting definitely in my program, starting in a place where I was hundreds of miles away in a different state, not knowing anyone there. And I had to do a lot of searching out for different resources myself. One of the earlier decisions that I also made was I had grown up in a small community where religious organization was a big part of our life, and I knew that they provided different resources. And so I got connected with a church fairly early on, and it proved beneficial to me because I did have individuals then who were willing to help me navigate, tell me where places were located, take me places when I needed to go, and then again, give me good advice about school school districts, which school district to put my child in, those kinds of things. So, I also got in touch in both places with, they used to have an organization through the chamber where you could contact them and they would send you information. So your local chamber of commerce, if you are going to relocate to a place, you can ask them if they have some welcome material for people who are relocating to that place. And the thing that really helped me the most in that packet of material is they had a listing of all of the utility companies and who I needed to contact and if there was a deposit and those kinds of things. So I think now, and this is really going to make me sound aged, you have the internet And you can actually get online and look for those different types of resources in the places that you're going to. I would start with the Chamber of Commerce because they have links out to everything else, and they can help you maneuver some of those, some of those issues that are surrounded by relocation.
Thank you.
Okay, another question is, what do you do if you have an advisor or professor who doesn't seem to get it or understand my needs as a mom and remains inflexible or non-accommodating?
Ooh,
I can speak to that because I actually did switch advisors in my program. And it wasn't a slight to the first advisor that I had. I was intentional about what I needed. And you have about, I think they give you a year or before your comprehensive exam at least to decide on the advisor that you're going to have for the duration of your program. And so I made sure I researched and found the person that I felt would be the most supportive, and she was excellent. And we met, like I said, we met weekly, sometimes to talk about research, to do data analysis, to like, sometimes we just sat and talked for an hour. But we were scared. I was on her calendar once a week. So she was the best advisor for me, and she was a mom. So she understood a lot of the things that she had a mom of young kids, like her children were 5 and under. So so that was one thing. And then the other thing is also seeking out mentors. And so at my, so my committee was comprised of people in and outside of the university. So you don't always have to rely on the people that are at your university. Sometimes reaching out through email, I would find people who had similar interests as me or similar experiences as me and reach out, and they always respond. Like, I've never had someone not offer their support when I asked for advice or help. So if you're in a situation where you're not able to switch advisors, you can have mentors that kind of fill that space and offer you advice on what to do in situations like that. So that was my advisor experience. But I do think that it's important to advocate for yourself in that way, and you don't have to just endure, an advisor who's not accommodating. You can make a change, petition to have the advisor that you want, that's best for you.
excellent, excellent.
And I think similar to what I had said earlier, you can have a secondary advisor. So my primary advisor, again, this was his very first, he had just finished his doctoral program. And this was his very first teaching position. And I was his first PhD student to graduate from the program. And I joke about the fact, or I did joke about the fact that we came to this mutual understanding. I needed a PhD, he needed a PhD student. So we worked together effectively to do that. But when I had other needs that he could not necessarily address due to the fact that he was early career himself, I went to my secondary advisor, who just happened to be the department chair, and that worked well for me.
Veronica, any other questions that, again, be mindful of time? One more question that we can address, at least publicly. We certainly can address some of these via emails.
Okay, looks like we have one question that just popped in. What do you advise during COVID-19 on how to manage the time between the kids and our work, research, classes, comp exams? Husband is faculty and wife is a PhD student.
Okay, so I'm out for this question. It's all you.
I'd say so I'm not quite in the same situation, but I did have some things I was trying to finish up, as I mentioned, for tenure. But also my husband just started a new faculty position. So when we relocated, he took an industry job for a couple of years until an academic one was able to come up again, because we're a two-body problem. And so I think the key has absolutely been really consistent communication. Like, okay, we're headed into a new semester, or in my case, modules, which are every 7 weeks. So we need to have a talk. Who's going to get the first kid on the 6:30 bus? Who's going to get the second kid on the 8:05 bus? Which one of us is going to be, available to make dinner on these nights? Like, just a little bit of pre-planning and then expectation setting around that, because I know what it's like to start a new faculty position. So I'm a little compassionate. Hopefully your husband knows what it's like to go through comp exams, right? And you know how much time you need devoted that you need to have for those. And I think just keeping that open line of communication, like, hey, just so you know, I've got to do grading for final exams. I'm going to just be useless to you for the next 48 hours. Like, just tell each other those things. Ask what you need for, advocate, be willing to rebalance duties, long-term and temporary, in order to help each other get to where you want to be.
Excellent. Well, to be mindful of time, we have reached the witching hour. I want to thank all three panelists. This has been a really enlightening discussion. There have been a couple things that have even popped in here that have surprised me, and the things that you all have touched on. And I hope for those of you who have tuned in, you found some insights into some of the issues that are being, and some insights and advice on how to handle some of these situations. I want to end this by saying I admire you all immensely for managing this. I just can't imagine the difficulty in balancing all the pieces that you're challenged with balancing. Obviously, all three of you have been very successful. We have a whole cadre of people who have come through this program that have managed it and done very, very well at it, and are having successful careers. We all know it can be done. It takes, I think, the thing that all of you touched on, it takes some planning, it takes some focus, it takes communications to be able to pull it off, but it is doable. And you can get through it. And, as all of you pointed out, for your little ones, they're not going to remember all the trepidations you're having about the process anyway. I mean, you're doing it because you're the parent, but they're not going to remember it. They just, that's not what they're focused in on. That is your job to worry about those things. Theirs is just to go through that process as smoothly as we as parents want them to go through that process. And ultimately they do. They don't remember the tough parts. You do, and just maintain your sanity as you go through it. Again, to all three of you, thank you very much for your time today. For all of you who tuned in, thank you very much for tuning in to this interesting discussion. Everyone take care, and we will all be in touch soon. And have a great holiday, everyone.
Thank you.
Be safe. Be safe. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.